Apologize, everybody. I forgot to add myself to the stage. Welcome to the Kill or Be Killed podcast. My name is Josh Kaywood, and Damien is out with some family stuff today and probably next week as well. So I am running the show. Clayton said he was going to join, but he has not shown up yet. So for now, it's just me. So for those of us, or those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. And so today, if it's just me, it's going to be probably a shorter show because as much as I can just sit here and talk to myself, it will get kind of boring, I think. But let's go ahead and get started. We'll see if Peyton comes or not. Or sorry, Clayton, if Clayton comes or not. All right. So what I want to talk about today, at least to get started, is the civil unrest in California, Arizona, and really starting to spread to the rest of the U.S. Because civil unrest obviously brings lots of its own unique self-defense and survival situation challenges. And so let us dive into that a little bit, I guess. And for those of you that are watching, feel free to comment because, like I said, otherwise I'm just going to be here talking to myself, and that's going to get boring really quick. So let's see. So the protests in California and stuff started because on June 6th, ICE carried out an aggressive raid program in Southern California, and they targeted all kinds of illegal areas that tend to have lots of illegal immigrants. So what I did, I've actually been super busy, and so I haven't had a lot of time to look into it. But what I did is I used ChatGPT because why not use AI? It's our friend, right? So apparently ICE targeted farm workers, factories, Home Depots, and they just went and got a whole bunch of illegals. And apparently people didn't like the tactics that were used. People didn't like the targeted efforts. Although I don't know how else you're going to really target and find all the illegal immigrants other than to go to the places that they hang out. So that sparked a whole bunch of protests, probably from illegal immigrant families and other well-meaning individuals that don't understand what it means to be an illegal immigrant, meaning that they've already broke the law to be here. And I'm not going to get too much into the politics of that because this isn't a political show. It is a show on self-defense. But if Damien was here, I'm sure we talk a little bit about it because he doesn't mind getting into it. But either way, amongst all the illegals, there are some that are very well-intentioned. They just want to come here and they just want to work and they want to do the best they can and they want a better life. That's great. That's awesome. My wife is an immigrant. She is not illegal. And I can tell you the process sucks. It's expensive. And there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. And if you're illegal, you're illegal. I'm sorry. You're breaking the law. So yeah. So what happened, right? Okay. So then they started protesting. And as we know, protests in liberal areas tend to turn into riots. I don't know why. For people that say they love peace and all these other things, they tend to get pretty violent. And so Los Angeles imposed curfews, which I grew up in Los Angeles County, and I can tell you I never saw that kind of a curfew before. And so the curfew that they imposed was from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. They did have curfews for minors back when I was a minor, and it was like midnight to 4, basically. Like really, there's no reason why a minor should be out on the street between those hours. That was the kind of thing. And it wasn't necessarily that you'd get in trouble. It was more like the cops would be like, "Hey, why are you out here? What are you doing?" Not that I was ever out at that time anyways, because I was usually asleep. So they imposed a curfew. Los Angeles County declared a state of emergency. And then some other cities also did basically the same as a preempt into, potential protests that could occur there, such as like Spokane. And then because the protests, the oh so peaceful protests turned rapidly less peaceful, President Trump federalized California's National Guard, initially 2,000 troops and later doubled that to 4,000. And he placed approximately 700 Marines on standby using Title 10 authority. So for those that don't know, Title 10 authority basically means that they have now activated a guard or reservist into active time status, which means that they show up every day in uniform, doing their job just as if they were on active full-time duty. So that's just Title 10 is just the process of what it's called to do that. So he basically activated 700 Marines. So if he put 700 Marines on standby using Title 10 authority, then that also means that hey Tom, that also means that those Marines were probably reservists because he wouldn't have to Title 10 700 Marines who were already active. He would just assign them wherever he wanted them. So, but for those that don't know, Marines don't have a National Guard capacity. The only National Guard capacities are Army and Air Force, which is the Army Guard and the Air Guard. And Clayton's joined us. Hey, Clayton. Hey, not just
Sorry, man. We're having some kind of rough weather here in South Carolina, and my internet connection keeps falling off. So if I leave you abruptly, that's probably why. Either that or I got.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, we had some crazy storms roll through the last couple of days, like flash flood warning after flash flood warning after flash flood warning. It was insane. But everything's fine. We stayed dry. That's what modern housing is, a wonderful thing. Okay, so what we're doing is we're talking about the protests in California and Arizona, and they're starting to spark nationwide. And so I gave like a very quick, why it happened, because ICE started conducting these massive raids targeting illegal immigrant locations like fields, Home Depots, etc. And then obviously people didn't like that. And so they started protesting. Peaceful protests often turn into unpeaceful protests. And I was just talking about how President Trump had, they use the term federalized, but basically he activated California's National Guard, 2,000 of them, later doubling it to 4,000. And then he also placed 700 Marines on standby using Title 10. And so I was explaining to everybody what Title 10 means and why he couldn't just activate them through the National Guard, because there's no Marines in the National Guard. They're only as reservists. And if they're already active, he would have just assigned them. So that's why he had to use Title 10 to place these 700 Marines on standby. Also, I don't have the details of what these 700 Marines do, right? Everybody thinks, oh, Marines, like they're all going to be gunners, but like they could be hospital people. They could be like, paperwork people. They could be,
My cousin was in the Marine Corps for 30 years. He was a meteorologist. Of course,
yeah, exactly.
First, but
yeah. My dad was a Marine first, and he was also a helicopter mechanic, right? Yeah, I get it. I get it. And so that's why they had to be activated using Title 10, which is the first such federal activation without state approval since 1965. So I used ChatGPT to give me like the top 10 bullet points. And so I'm using that as kind of a reference. Anyways,
I've heard about that thing. I might have to check it out.
There's lots of really good ones. A bunch of my friends like one called, I think, Gronk or something like that. I don't know. I haven't used it, but they like it better. ChatGPT is it's pretty easy to use, pretty user friendly, so I go with it. All right. Let's see. So what did some of the protesters do? Let's see. Protesters blocked freeways. What's up? Go ahead. What'd you say, Clayton? I didn't catch it. I think he froze. We'll move on without him. All right. So protesters blocked freeways. They set vehicles on fire. They staged demonstrations outside federal buildings and City Hall. Most remained peaceful, which is typical, right? When you start getting massive protests, most people do remain peaceful. But then there's always those that don't want to be peaceful, that want to just go and do whatever else. And honestly, it's a protest, especially protests that start out peaceful are a vehicle for those that want to commit crime to then be more anonymous to do the things that they want to do and to use it as an excuse. And then you got mob mentality, and one person starts rocking a vehicle. Suddenly you got 3 people rocking a vehicle. Then you got 20 people rocking a vehicle. And then said vehicle's been flipped and now they're setting it on fire. And mob mentality is a real thing. All right. So then because of all that, and they're starting to get unrowdy, then obviously the LAPD steps in, and then you get the LAPD in their riot gear, and now they're using flashbang grenades, tear gas, pepper balls, rubber bullets, mounted units. What's to say? At least 6 protesters, 7 journalists, 5 horses, and several officers were injured, with over 400 arrests having occurred so far. That doesn't sound that peaceful to me. I mean, granted, it could if you're talking like 10,000 people and only, 20 people got hurt, that's really not that bad.
Right.
However,
and
do you want to be with those 20 people?
Yeah, that's the thing about it. Right. Yeah, that's the thing about the protests and stuff. Yes, in this country, we have a legal right to protest, and that is a good thing. It a lot of times doesn't really, in practical practice or application, a lot of times it doesn't really accomplish much. But it makes a statement, and it puts a little pressure on some of the government officials and everything that sometimes maybe need a little pressure put on them. It's not going to change the world by itself, protests or not, but it serves several purposes, and I think they're good purposes, but it can also, like everything else, it can be misused by the wrong people, and that gets everybody in trouble.
For sure.
And
I mean, that's how PsyOps works, literally.
That happens so many times that it's not funny, and a few bad apples, if you would, mess things up for everybody, and that happens a lot in these types of situations.
Oh yeah. So I mean, if anybody wants to take the time to read the actual name of it's, hold on, I'm gonna look it up. But if you go and you read actual China's irregular warfare manual, I'm gonna look it up here really quick because of course I have a copy of it. Oh yeah, that's what I want. Let's see.
They can't been around for as long as they have and not come up with some good ideas, right?
Yeah. Anyway, so if you read like their manual, and what is it called? On Guerrilla Warfare by Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong. Yeah. So if you were to read that, right, it literally talks about how you use protests to your advantage to get the group riled up, plant some key people in there to get everything going, and then that creates momentum, and suddenly now a peaceful gathering turns into a riotous gathering, right? And that's like psychological operations 101.
And it also well, go ahead and then I'll comment.
Oh, I was just gonna say, we do it to other countries, right? Like, so to think that other countries aren't here making this happen on our soil would be ridiculous, because we do it to other countries as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely it is. You better believe it. But what let me catch my train of thought again. What we in law enforcement and security, a lot of times they're two different things, of course. Private sector security, public sector law enforcement. But I got my toes stuck in both of them, and there's a lot of similarity. There's differences a lot of times, but there's a lot of similarities from a physical security standpoint anyway. They're very, very similar in most cases. And when you have a big gathering, especially when it's getting kind of interesting, it's getting a little rowdy, it's getting a little worked up, people starting to throw things. Okay, now you're starting to get out of the realm of lawful protest, because damage or harm is increased, the likelihood of it. And you have a right to protest and holler about something as loud as you want, but you do not have the right, none of us do, to injure other people or even damage other people's property because we're not happy about something. And that's where a lot of people seem to either not understand about protests or either they don't care. And I think it's a combination of both, really.
Yeah.
And we could, we could dig into that for hours. But where I was going with this is in law enforcement or security, when you have a group of protesters or a bunch of people gathering to express their dissatisfaction, okay, which again within limits is fine. It's a good thing, even sometimes. But when it starts getting kind of rowdy or out of hand, we start looking for key individuals. We kind of call them ringleaders just as a catch-all, but or instigators
Mm-hmm.
you know stir people to stir in the pot or whatever. We look for it to see if there are any individuals who are turning what may have begun as a peaceful, um, organized protest into something a little more sinister, a little something a little more dangerous, at least for everybody, for the
Yeah.
participants, or for the community, for the public, for law enforcement. Because I mean, when you start getting a number of people, X number of people gathered together, and I've got a kind of a thing that I had done for security. I'll probably throw it up here at some point when it's appropriate. But there's different kinds of mobs, okay, different classifications based on who makes it up, what their purpose is, what their relationship was to each other prior to things starting to go sour, whether they knew each other or not, or they just happened to be in the same place at the same time, what purpose they were there for. A lot of variables. You think of a mob, and once that starts, it's the nasty, mindless beast that nothing can stop. And yeah, that's kind of true, and in some cases, it's very true. But there's still different kinds of it, and a lot of people may not realize that. So I'll probably throw that up on the screen here shortly, just to demonstrate what I'm talking about. Because
Yeah, that'd be cool. I'm interested in seeing it.
I'll go ahead and throw it up now. Let's see.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
If
Yeah,
I
while you find that
know
and throw
how,
it up, that'd be cool. Yeah, I love things like that, right? Because you make a good point in that the kind of people who show up, the reason behind why they're there, will make a difference on how peaceful it stays and how rapidly it deteriorates, right? Because
exactly.
what's their motivations for being there, right? Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Let me see. I know I got this stuff somewhere. I remember doing a whole big thing of this one time before on a term paper when I was in college for my security stuff. So I got it in that somewhere. Um,
Yeah, that's why I have all these like military manuals and like irregular warfare manuals and stuff, is because the same thing from school, studying it.
there you go. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right,
I would get on these crazy, I'd find these random web.
Figure out how to be able.
I think if you click present, is that something you can click? Do you have an option for that?
That all depends on where it's at.
I don't know, because now that I have the creator tools, I don't know what it looks like.
Yeah.
Like a share screen. Do you have like a share screen button?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Let me blow my stuff back up a little closer. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm as usual.
You could always email it to me too.
Things with my slow.
You can always email it to me too.
And I got a present button here. Let me look at. Let's see. Share screen. All right.
Yeah. There you go.
Share screen. Okay. Let me hit share screen, and Well, it might be easiest with two monitors, but I ain't got two monitors. So let me share the screen. And aha. Let's see. Select a tab to share. That means I got to go. Let's hear that.
All right. So while you're trying to figure that out, so one of the things that's coming from this,
Okay, yeah.
and that's turning into the nationwide is apparently a no kings protest, right? Because people are saying that Trump's activation of the guard outside of the state's purview, and apparently he's getting ready to do a military parade. I didn't hear anything about this, but
in violation of posse comitatus.
That they're saying that he's setting himself up as a king, which like if he's doing a military parade and like all kinds of other things. And I was actually having this discussion with one of my friends the other day, and I was talking about how I don't necessarily agree with a lot of stuff that Trump does, and I don't agree with something showed up. Add that to stage. Hey, there we go. All right, so before we talk about that, let me finish my thought.
Cool.
Yeah, it's working. Okay, yeah. We got it. Just give me a moment. All right. So we can still see you though, so don't do anything weird.
Okay.
There's a lot of things that I don't necessarily agree with Trump. And I was having this discussion the other day of how he's walking an incredibly fine line of stomping on states' rights, and how yes, he's got responsibility for keeping the nation safe. He's got responsibility for keeping the citizens safe. But when you start meddling in states' affairs, it comes down to one of these situations where did California make the bed that they're now sleeping in? You know what I mean? And how much do you step in and say, well, there's illegals here, and not all these illegals have best intentions for America as a whole. We know there's terrorists, we know there's gang members, and all kinds of other things. So at what point in time does Trump say, well, California, you're not doing your job to protect the nation, so I'm going to do my job to protect the nation? And how much does that actually cross into states' rights and their ability to say, hey, we don't care that they're here or not? And so it's a fine line, and I'm torn, because after I had my discussion with my friend, I was like, I see your points, I see my points, and there's no easy answer here, right? And that's what makes it complicated, is there's no easy answer.
Yeah, there's the legal answer is maybe easier to define, because of like posse comitatus, for example. That law is it's got some gray area to it, but it's pretty firm in some respects. Okay, and that's a big deal here. This could potentially violate a law that's been around since the late 1800s. Which that in itself may indicate that it may need to be looked at again and revised. But until it is, it's still the law. And even except in extremely rare cases, even the president of the United States cannot violate that law.
No, he's subject to laws just like we are, right?
Yeah, so. And some people don't feel that they have to be subject to the law. I deal with those quite often that think that the law does not apply to them. I hate to tell them, no matter who you are, it does apply to you if you're in this country, and there's a reason for that. It may not be convenient at the time. It may not be a great thing. It may need, sometimes to be different. But until it is different, it is what it is.
And we have processes to make it different.
Address those issues.
Yeah.
And they're
not fast. The problem is they're not fast, right? By the time you get done addressing those issues, it's probably going to be a generation. Yeah, it's probably going to be a generation has gone by. But it can still happen.
Yep.
You know,
I
and the
agree
problem
with
is
that
like we think about
100%.
as people, we think about what's happening right now to me, right? What's happening right now to me, what's happening right now to my kids. But when you think about a nation, you have to think long term. What's going to happen 50 years from now? What's going to happen 100 years from now? How is our country going to be working then, right? And it's hard for a lot of people to think that far ahead.
Right, it is. It is.
All right, so send
right.
send this
Yeah,
send this chart you got.
Yeah, and then we'll come back if we have time, and if it suits your vision of this podcast, then we'll come
I don't
back
have a
to
vision. We're just talking.
a little bit. So
I don't have a vision. We're just talking.
This is something that I kind of teach. I've taught this to law enforcement, private security, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's basically a lot of people don't. It's like a lot of things with security, or even a little bit with law enforcement, but certainly with a lot of things. Once it's pointed out to you and explained to you, it's kind of common sense. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's not, you know, alchemy. That's kind of simple and straightforward. But until it's pointed out to you, I mean, even that can apply to the self-defense that we teach.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know, right?
You don't know what you're right. Exactly. Those 4 levels. Yep. It's unconscious incompetence. You don't even know what you don't know yet.
Exactly.
But once you see it and see how kind of it makes sense, well, then everybody learns a little something. Everybody understands something a little better. And usually that's a good thing. So, but anyway, I digress or whatever.
All right. So talk us through this chart.
All right. Well, your different crowd types, as you can see, you know, I won't read it word for word because everybody watching, the 3 or 4 who are watching, can all read. But you have a casual crowd. The bystanders are loosely gathered individuals. They don't necessarily know each other.
So define it. I'm gonna have you define each of these, right?
Okay.
So define a casual crowd. So is a casual? Wait, hold up. Is a casual crowd? Would that be like people at the park?
Yep, or the mall, or people walking downtown. People that are not necessarily there for the same purpose, and who do not necessarily know each other, and to their knowledge, do not necessarily have a common interest. You know, other than they're out to enjoy the weather that day.
Right. You know, and I think that's an important distinction, right? Like you go to an amusement park, you're in a crowd, right? Yep. Whether you want to believe it or not, you're in a crowd, but you're just in a casual crowd, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay. Exactly. All right, go ahead.
And that is our lowest risk level because there is no underlying unifying feature with those people typically. Okay. They're there doing their own thing with their own little group or as by themselves. And if something happens, then they are going to act more or less to a point as individuals. They are not going to be cohesive. They're the least likely to become that hive-minded monster, unstoppable flood of human flesh that is so dangerous. Okay.
Yeah.
They may all scatter, but they may all scatter. Probably will all scatter in all directions. They're not going to all flow in one direction and to a common objective necessarily, unless it's a place of perceived safety. Okay.
Yeah.
The potential danger for those, if there's an emergency, then there will be panic, but it will be disorganized. It will be mindless stampedes, just trying to get away from whatever they feel threatened by. If you watch and see the streets when 9/11 happened, okay, you saw people, they're staring there watching the buildings collapse, but once that starts happening and the dust clouds start filling everything up, they turn around and they haul ass. They don't know where they're going. They're not doing it as a group. They're doing it as individuals or very small groups, just trying to get away from the danger. Now, that's a concern. But
I think it's good to note that these crowd types can morph, right? They can change. So obviously the casual crowd casual crowd in an emergency suddenly becomes an escape panic crowd, right? Which is a critical risk level.
That can definitely change. Yes, that is a very good, excellent point that I usually make, because it's so good, as you pointed out, such a good point, rather. It's important to understand this may start out as a casual crowd level at the low risk level. Everybody's just walking up down the sidewalk, enjoying the day, the weekend, or whatever. The next thing you know, if you see there is one type on here that is listed as critical risk, and that is the escape or panic crowd. It can go from the casual to the escape or panic in just a click. Okay, the casual crowd really applies, that classification applies when nothing's going wrong. This is normal operating conditions. Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody's going about their business. You may still need to keep an eye on it. Sure. As cops, we do. As security officers, we do. We still got to watch it, to make sure nothing goes stupid. But as long as nothing happens to energize these people, it's going to remain a low risk level. But if something happens, it can instantly turn from the lowest risk level into the highest, most critical, which is the escape and panic type crowd, which people get hurt and killed in that. But anyway,
all right, move on to the next one.
Yeah, I mean, and basically, that's kind of, most cases are that fall into that category, the casual crowd. But when things happen, that's when you start getting into these others. You got the cohesive crowd, which is they're there. They may not know each other, and they may have different opinions about whatever is going on there, but whatever is happening in that area is why they are there. That is their common denominator. At a sporting event or a concert, they're all there to hear the music or watch the team play. Now, they may not all like the same songs. They may not all like the same team, but there is a reason that has brought those people there. Okay. And that is a moderate risk level. A lot of times, because of the environment, really, Josh, plays a big part in that. You can have open areas, but a lot of times you're in stadiums or in what's the word for Lord, coliseums, or indoor or contained. Even if they're outdoor, they have walls, and crowds will tend to have to funnel through limited egress and access areas. That's where the danger starts happening.
Wasn't there a concert a couple of years ago where it was indoors and they didn't plan appropriately and it got way too hot and people started suffocating and nobody could move around and people died and
heat exhaustion and things like that. I don't remember the details of it, but I remember that. And when that starts happening, you're going to have some people panic. So that's an example of how this, going to a concert just to listen to music and have a good time, can turn into a potentially dangerous or deadly situation when the panic sets in. So the main dangers there are crush injuries. A lot of people in these types of, when things go south and people start moving in mass, a lot of people get trampled. That's one of the biggest causes of injuries. You fall down, I don't care how big and strong you are, you're not going to be able to pick up hundreds of pounds of flesh walking on top of you very easily.
No.
Because the body mechanics of how you're positioned, if nothing else. You might can bench press 600 pounds with one hand, on a normal circumstance, but not when you're laying on your belly with everything on your back and you can't.
Somebody's on your hand, somebody's on your foot.
Right. Exactly. So, even big guys can be trampled to death. Aggressive.
It reminds me of Black Friday sales back in the 90s.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have seen people draw blood over them things, but I never got into them. But they just about every year they made the news somewhere. Because some chick, usually women, had been there since 2:00 that morning, waiting in line for 6 hours for a store to open so they could get something for their kid for Christmas, and there wasn't one left. by the time they get to it, and those ladies will get evil when they're fighting over the last thing that they've stood in line for 6 or 8 hours for. I mean, they will hurt
Yeah.
each other. I'm like, whoa, you can
Yeah.
have it. I don't need it that bad. But anyway, aggressive fans. Sometimes sports are kind of notorious for, especially in other countries. Soccer in South America, dude.
Europe, soccer in Europe, man, they start rioting. It's crazy.
Yeah, you got one of them things. I mean, you taking your life in your hands because they get into it. The fans
Mhm.
do. There's a lot more violence in the stands than there is on the field in most cases.
Yeah, I think, but again, that morphs, right? It morphs from a cohesive crowd into like an aggressive mob, right? Or even expressive crowd.
Right. This thing could have started out peaceful, quiet, everybody smiling and waving to each other,
Yeah.
Smiling at strangers, and within minutes or less, even, it can turn into people getting killed.
Yeah.
And then there's also a category on the side that everybody can probably have done completely read by the time I got through with the first one. Just typical ways that we handle it. They're not detailed.
Right. Measures that you use to mitigate, right?
Ways we can offset
Yeah.
the risk. Is risk control, basically.
Yeah.
It's expressive crowd is the next one. That is typically where your people are there for a common purpose, that shared, whatever's going on there. But it's also a thing that typically creates some emotion in most of the people there. Vigils for things that have happened, for people that have been wrongfully killed or hurt or whatever. We have a lot of those in the public area. Rallies and a lot of religious gatherings. Okay, can also, because there is something about the subject. It's not a neutral subject to these people.
Yeah. Yeah. And people get emotional, right?
Not a positive one. It's usually there's an element of dissatisfaction or concern or offense or whatever involved with it. And so that makes it an elevated. And again, these risk levels they're a gauge of how serious this is, but it's also a kind of a gauge of how likely it is or not.
Yeah, it's the potential for risk, right?
Right. Yeah. That this thing can turn from a peaceful gathering, even if there's a little bit of hostility or whatever. Okay, as long as it's kept in line, it's no great big deal. But if it escalates, people could get hurt or die. But in these types, the expressive, you've already got a powerful emotion that's being, externalized, let's say. And so emotional shifts that can lead to flash violence. People they can go from agitated to violent very quickly. And once it happens, it tends to snowball. One guy does it, and the guy beside him is like it just jumps, boom, boom, boom. It's like it's contagious.
Yeah.
Some people will say, "Oh man, this is too much," and leave.
All right. So not that this isn't interesting. It's super interesting, but I think it's dragging just a little bit. We're running short on time, so I'm gonna pinpoint a couple of things, and then I want you to describe those things. Okay. So what's the difference between an aggressive mob and a hostile criminal mob?
Well, an aggressive mob really, let's say, the thing about just mindless aggression, which is totally destructive, okay, again, there's no real thought to it. It's tear it down, burn it up, blow it up, throw it away, grab it and run with it, there may be a sense of what you can get out of it, what you can gain, but it's more usually, Josh, about the act of destruction. It's a venting of pent up aggression, hatred, emotions, negative emotions. It's really more about tearing shit up. Okay, a criminal activity. Again, none of this is set in stone and none of it's 100% accurate, but criminal activity a lot of times is a little more organized and purposeful because criminals do most of the time what they do for personal gain. Okay. The least risk for the most gain for the least risk. We teach that in our self-defense stuff. That's the majority of the aggressors that you will come across. Okay. They want easy gain. Not much risk. So a criminal mob type situation either can be a smokescreen that's generated by the organized ringleaders in the back to draw attention, get attention away from what they're really wanting to do. And, law enforcement and the public and witnesses, they're all busy with the crowd. So these guys, race is coming apart. I must be getting into it too much.
Getting y'all excited.
Yeah, get all excited, man. They get distracted. All of you law enforcement, you people get distracted by the big, flashy crowd, while the ringleaders that instigated it, now they don't have as many eyes on them. It's maybe easier for them to do what they really want to do. Now, in some cases, the destruction may be the goal, and then the biggest difference I would say between just the aggressive mob doing random stuff is that the criminal who is bent on destruction as a purpose, it will probably be a little more targeted, okay, than it will be in just a mob going wild. It really boils down to intent and target, whether it's just anything and everything they can get their hands on, tearing it up just for the sake of tearing it up, or if there's really a little more purpose behind it. That's probably
so
biggest difference.
I like looking at the potential danger column in this regard, right? So you have attacks, arson, and looting for aggressive, but then you have pre-planned chaos, weapons, and sabotage, right? And that makes a big difference, right? So like you're talking that targeting, right? Hey, we're gonna go in and we're gonna get a crowd going, right? And then we're going to come in behind and we're going to slash all the tires of the police cars so that they can't then pursue us, and they're going to be out of tires for like the next week, right? Or we're going to go
do and don't have to worry about being chased
right, or whatever it is, right? We're going to attack while they're taking down, while they're flipping cars and burning cars, we're going to start taking down communication poles.
Right. Exactly. And we know where all the cops are going to be, so we ain't got to worry about them. So, but also conversely, it could be, okay, we got this crowd kind of riled up. We stood up on the box and got their attention. Hey man, what about this? What do y'all have? Acting like one of the crowd, getting them stirred up, touching the tender points, just to get them riled up and angry. And then, okay, it's time. Oh, look what I found: a stick or a gun. Look, guys, and hand it off to them, and let them start doing the dirty work with it.
Yeah,
passing the tools along. You supply them discreetly, but they're the ones going to be using them because you got them worked up first.
Right.
And so now they're in the right mindset to do that kind of thing. Let's turn it up a notch. Let's introduce some foreign objects in the ring, shall we?
Yeah. Hey, so question: what from a law enforcement perspective, how many people does it take to classify a crowd?
To what now? A crowd?
How many people does it take to classify it as a crowd?
To classify it as a crowd, man, that could be 3 people, really.
3 people.
It depends on the circumstances. A lot of times.
So I'm getting to a point. That's why I was curious.
Yeah.
Right.
Basically, when it becomes a crowd, really the way I like to look at it, and the way some people in my circles like to look at it, is based on how many responders or how many security personnel or how many cops or whatever you have.
So it comes down to how many people one, we'll call it a professional, can handle by themselves.
Right.
right? So
It
let's
comes
say, right. So let's say you feel confident that at any given general time, you can probably handle like, you know, people around you and feel like everything's under control and you're safe, generally speaking, obviously, right? Maybe 4 people,
at
right?
best. Yeah, and that's in
At
the
best, right.
calm. Yeah.
Right. So we're saying maybe 4 people, right? So maybe 3. Okay. And
That's a
so,
birthday party.
right, exactly. So like you go to a birthday party and obviously there's like 20 people there.
Yeah.
Right. But you're probably only interacting with like 3 or 4, right?
Exactly.
Okay. But that's to you as a single person, 3 or 4 people is now a crowd, right? Because you are now overwhelmed by the amount of people that are there.
Yep.
Right.
That's a good
Okay.
way
So
to
the point that I was getting at is when we're talking about these types of crowds, right? And we're talking about, a criminal crowd versus an aggressive crowd versus an expressive crowd, right? A criminal crowd could be a group of gang members 4 deep who are intent on causing mayhem and mischief, right? We think crowd and we automatically think, 5,000 people walking the streets, but that doesn't have to be the case, right?
Doesn't have to be near that many. The most dangerous may be that 500 crowd members that's been agitated by these 4 guys. Okay.
Yeah.
The 4 guys may really no longer be of much concern compared to the 500 people they got riled up and stomping the streets. But yes, what you said is very true. It is. There's no straight 100% correct answer every time. It varies by circumstance.
Right. It obviously varies.
Sure.
Yeah. We talk a lot about, especially in the self-defense world and the survival world of, MET-TC, right? It's a military term, MET-TC, right? And basically what that means for anybody that doesn't know is like every situation is different and you have to take all the factor considerations in every situation to then be like, okay, this is how this situation is developing, right? And the same applies obviously to crowds, right? But the point I wanted to get at too for a safety survival perspective is, crowd control, right? Now, like obviously it's not our job as a civilian to control a crowd. However, de-escalation techniques, putting yourself in safe positions, controlling the amount of people that are around you at any given point in time and where they are around you, right, is all crowd control. You know what I'm saying?
Don't put yourself in a bad position where you can't get out.
That's it. Exactly.
Your life may get real hard real quick if you allow yourself to. And
you got 6 people.
The things, Josh, yourself, they don't give that a minute's thought.
No.
They're there to have a good time, or they're there for this purpose or that purpose. And some people still believe, although how in this day and age, I bless their hearts. I don't understand how I never thought it could happen here.
Yeah, so I'm in the boat. I'm in the boat of I prepare for the worst or expect the worst, but I hope for the best, right? And with that being said,
a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. So with that being said, I think most people, right, the vast majority of people on this planet are good people, right? They want to be good people. We all make mistakes. We all get emotional, right? But the vast majority of people, I think, want to be good people, right? And this is proved time and again by the amount of people that conduct community service, the amount of people who help people that they don't know, et cetera, right? It's proven time and time again. However, there are people that are intent on causing harm to other people. Right? That is their goal and mission in life.
What does that cat say in Batman about the Joker? Some people just like to watch the world burn.
That's it. Some people just like to watch the world. And I've known some of those people that just like to watch the world burn.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're different.
Yeah, they're different, right? So psychologically, and I've mentioned this on the show, like on some other past episodes, but psychologically, I don't know what the statistic now is, but this was back in like 2004. The psychological statistic was 1 in 26 people don't have a conscience. Right. And so what that means is most of those people like are raised right, with good values and all these other things, and they just think like this is what everybody does, so I do it, and they don't realize that they think differently than other people, that they feel differently than other people. They don't even realize it. They're just going about life being a productive person.
Not psychopath, but sociopath.
Right, exactly. Yeah. They're a sociopath, but they're not psychotic, right?
Right.
They're just they just don't. But it's like they don't even realize it, right? They're just there doing their thing.
Yeah, they don't.
But it's those
one that they're making other people feel a lot of times.
Right.
They just don't think about it because they're not wired to think about it.
Yeah, they just don't think about it.
Then at the extreme levels, some of them think that they're the only real person in the world, and everybody else is just, I don't know, there, but they're different. They're not like me,
Yeah. It gets weird for sure. Yeah, it gets weird.
It can get real.
Yeah, anyways. So, but the point is that even most of these people, most of these people that have sociopathic tendencies and or sociopaths still are good people, right? They just don't realize that maybe if they do something that, they're still going to try and do the right thing, right? But it's those people that are sociopaths who are also then psychopaths, right?
Right. There are people that are both. Yep.
Yeah. Or just psychopaths and they just don't care, right?
Yep. Even some of those that are both diagnosed with both conditions, that doesn't mean they're going to be serial killers or mass murderers. And there's
no, it doesn't.
There's a difference between a serial killer and a spree killer or a mass shooter or whatever. We're not going to get into all that on this episode. That could take a while too. But they're all mass murderers, but there's a difference between a serial killer and somebody who one time goes out and kills 50 people with a gun, and then he's
obviously there's intent, there's ideology, there's planning, et cetera.
The reason behind it, what motivates it, is usually totally different.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, most, I say most, obviously it happens, but most people are not going to encounter those kinds of people.
They're not.
They are few and far between. Thank goodness.
Some people have estimated that kind of look at this kind of stuff. Estimated you're probably more likely to die from a lightning strike than you are from a serial killer.
Right.
And that's probably true.
Yeah. Right. But we know people die by both, right? So why, it's like, you're like, hey, I have a better chance of winning the lottery than I do of getting hit by lightning. That doesn't mean I'm going to go outside and run around when there's a lightning storm.
That's all I need to know. Either one can kill
like it doesn't mean I'm going to run outside in a lightning storm because I'm like, I'm not going to get hit, right? Like, I'll be fine. Like, no, that's still dumb, right? And the same thing happens. The same thing applies to this self-defense and survival, right? Like, just because the likelihood of you coming up across a psychopathic, sociopathic, serial killer, whatever, is incredibly low, doesn't mean that there aren't people out there that are intending to do you harm. And why would you take the risk?
Exactly. Because it does happen. Because there's people in the graveyard that can attest to that.
Right. That's my point. Right. It obviously does happen, right?
Exactly. There you go.
Anyways, so everybody, I think we're going to wrap up here. It's a good spot to stop, I think. Thanks for joining in. We started talking about the California protests that are now spreading to the rest of the nation. So with that and our big discussion about crowd types and how to stay safe and things like that, guys, be careful. Don't get caught up in anything. I can tell you right now, any protests, 9 times out of 10 are not worth it, not going to be important enough, and not going to make a difference. However, if you really feel like you have to be there, right, because it is your right to protest, and there are right ways and there are wrong ways to do it. And if you think you have to be there and you have to protest, be safe, be smart, head on a swivel. And then it starts morphing, right? We talked about these different crowd types of morphing. If it starts morphing into something that you didn't get into, it's time to leave before it gets worse.
That's right.
All right. And with that little PSA, we're going to stop here. So thanks for joining us, and train honestly, as Damien says. I got to get my own catchphrase. You know what I mean? I'm going to think on that. Damien, help me come up with a catchphrase if you're watching this. All right.
We're done that this week anyway.
He's got some family stuff going on.
Okay.
Good family stuff, so everybody knows. Not bad family stuff. He's just
to visit his boy.
No, his daughter came up to visit.
Oh, okay. I know sometime or another before too long this year he talked about taking a trip taking a trip to see his boy at school
Yeah.
or something. But
Yeah.
So-
So anyways, we will catch you all later. Thanks for joining us.